Hello. Welcome to part 2 of my masochistic journey. If you see this video first, I highly recommend watching the first part before this, as I fully explain the vast majority of the strategies I employ throughout most of this run. If you don't want to watch the first part, that's also fair. All you really need to know is bow very good, Manus very bad, and slow weapons big no-no. No, I'm sure there was something else. Oh right! Right, back to where we left off. O and S. A dual boss fight with no cheesy spots, no off-angle sniping positions, and barely any terrain in the arena, with 2 full health Manuses, each equally aggressive and with their own second phase to deal with. Let's get to it. My first idea is to use the composite bow setup from part 1, that being the grass crest, bow, and full stone armor, giving me defense while allowing me to attack safely. This setup is perfect for one-on-one fights, but severely lacks damage when you add a second Manus into the mix. 1 Manus is fast enough, but 2 Manuses in the same arena is just impossible for this build to deal with. Back to the drawing board. First of all, I decide that I just take way too much damage. Fortunately, the absolute highest physical defense armor is right here in the capital, and while I actually don't mean Havel's set, I grab it as well as Havel's shield. I then head to the giant blacksmith and buy every piece of the giant set. When fully upgraded, the giant's chest, arms and legs, and the helmet of another set actually give the highest defense in the game. The giant set also upgrades with Twinkling Titanite, which the giant blacksmith sells infinitely. Just another reason as to why he is the absolute king of this run. The helmet in question that gives the highest defense is located near the painting, the helmet of the Black Iron set. Of course, this set had to be located at the far corner of the painting room, guarded by a more billion Manuses. After breaking the R1 button on my controller, I eventually clear out the room and grab my absolute favourite heavy armour in the game, the Black Iron set. More important than Fashion Souls, the fully upgraded giant set with this helmet, which also upgrades with Twinkling Titanite, gives me the highest physical defense in the game. It's not an enormous improvement from the stone armor, but every bit counts. With both the Favor Ring and Havel's Ring equipped, I can fast roll with the full set and the Grass Crest shield. This gives me enormous defense, both in terms of agility and durability, but damage is still an enormous issue. The unfortunate fact is that no matter how much I min-max my defense and survivability, the 2 Manuses will outdamage me in such a small arena. I have to hit harder. To that end, I say goodbye to the capital for now. I slowly make my way back to Firelink. Just to absolutely confirm, I kill the giant Manus who would normally drop a chunk. He, of course, doesn't, creating an issue I more or less expected. How exactly would I get chunks? Solving this isn't on the agenda yet, but it's still an irritation for the future. Anyways, safe travels back to Andre later, I clear out the church walkway again, reliving some lovely memories, before finally getting back to Firelink. If you're wondering what my plan is, it's to psych myself up to make the journey to Capra. While I slowly head back to the Berg, I'll explain why I'm so reluctant to do this. 1. The lower Berg is just as choked with Manuses as the top half is. 2. There's no way to exploit the terrain to help deal with the Manuses. In other words, I can't block Manuses on as many hallways or walkways, or bait them off the map since the area is far more linear. And 3, the Capra demon, the boss of the area, the enemy that drops the depths key, and the single only way to progress to the large Ember, has 2 dogs in his arena. That means there is 3 Manuses in an area even smaller than the O and S arena. I hope that puts into perspective exactly how worried I was about this chunk of the run. The large Ember is the only way I can upgrade the composite bow to help in the O and S fight. But I needed to get past this first. Resigning myself to an irritating hour, I head back through Havel's tower, and after getting a slap on the back for encouragement, make it down the ladder. After getting a small teaser of the screen shaking audio to come, I open the shortcut and then realise something quite interesting. The fire can actually damage Manus at an extremely slow rate. I decide to admire the scenery for a good 8 minutes, letting the extremely slow but safe damage take out what I'm assuming is some of the dogs and hollows. With 3 down, I head onto the stairs and slowly whittle another one down. With the 4th Manus down, I try to go save Griggs in his little house, but another Manus jumps in. I kill the 5th Manus, then realise there is an entire Pez dispenser of Manuses in Griggs' hallway, with one popping out every single time I try to save the poor guy. I get rushed back to the stairs by 2 more, and after letting one get nice and crispy, I convince the 2nd Manus to hop in the fire as well. He gets an arrow in the forehead as a treat, before another Manus decides he needs 200 arrows directly shot into his esophagus. I happily oblige. He gets shy halfway through though, so I have to run down a few more times to bait him into the perfect spot. I very nearly waste the last half an hour by trying to shoot him normally, but he finally goes down. I play red light green light with the last Manus, but the light goes red right as I open Griggs' door and he throws a tantrum. He makes me watch him burn to death as punishment. Finally, the hallway is mostly clear, but unfortunately Griggs died during the fighting, probably from a black orb through the wall. That's okay, I only spent 45 minutes trying to get to him. Another Manus, also grieving over his death, decides to join me in remembrance, and we share a banquet of arrows in honour of Griggs' memory. The instant I start to read Griggs' will, however, another Manus weasels his way into the funeral. It turns out that Griggs actually left this Manus approximately 64 large arrows, so I hand him his inheritance. Finally, the hallway is clear, after around 50 minutes of hanging around on the stairs. I'd just like you, dear viewer, to keep in mind that if I die at any point before or during the Capra demon, I will have to repeat all of that, plus a trip to Andre to restock, and make it all the way back. Just keep that in mind. Anyways, the next chunk of this hallway is also blocked off, but is narrow enough to allow for a few minutes of safe shooting. This leaves the fog door open for the taking, but I make the smarter decision of clearing the shortcut first. Of course, that requires another 20 minutes of very, very slow shooting. Eventually, the path is clear, and I make it to the undead merchant, who I completely forgot actually sells arrows, meaning if I die to Capra, I can just fill up at her on the way back for a new attempt. I open the shortcut and head to the fog door, fully expecting to be soft locked for upgrades for the rest of the run, and the dogs fell out of the map! I don't know how or why, but oh my god, I will take it. Capranus gets cheesed to absolute hell and back, and I finally get the depths key. Unfortunately, the saga of the large Ember is far from over. The depths is actually choked with even more Manuses, and the large Ember is in the middle of it all. It isn't safe to hit these Manuses on the staircase, so I decide my best bet is to try and rush down the alone Manus with a melee weapon. My weapon of choice is the Crystal Halberd, picked up in Anor Londo. It has low durability, but I don't really care since I doubt I'll use it again. The Manus goes down after sucking a bit of my resources away, giving me a small sniper spot as a reward. A fucking eternity later, the other 2 Manuses go down, and I suss out the staircase. It's pretty messy. If you're wondering what my plan is, there's a small skip you can do where you can jump off the stairs and land right in front of the chest with the Ember. My hope is to pull that off, let the chest animation save me, and hopefully get the Ember before I die. This is how that goes. The Manus body blocks me. I'm not even going to show what happens next, it annoys me too much. I make the journey from Darkroot to Firelink, and slowly head back through the shortcut, and back to the depths for round 2. Repeat the same process but with a fiery halberd, and after some shooting, I'm back in the same position. I decide to play it smarter, and try to whittle down the body blocker. Turns out that's a super bad idea, so instead I run around the little balcony to bait him into a better spot, then risk it all on a jump. I fucking make it, and finally get my hands on the large Ember, the absolute key to the rest of this run. Before I leave and celebrate, I make another split-second decision that turns out to have absolutely astronomical implications. I save Laurentius. Of course, another soul saved from the Manus Plague is a blessing, but Laurentius' role in this run is enormous, as I will soon find out. Back to Firelink I go, and grab the Pyro Flame, before realizing that, unlike the large Ember, the very large Ember is in a much wider area with far less enemies, and a shortcut that drops me right next to it. I stroll on over, completely glossing over an area that will shave double-digit inches from my hairline in the very near future, and happily grab the very large Ember. After an hour and a half of grueling effort, I finally have the Dark Souls Infinity Stones in my grasp. The large and very large Ember. With how far I can level my character in this run, these 2 Embers are a godsend for my damage, as upgrades affect scaling as well as base damage. Andre, deciding not to comment on the enormous brain damage I've clearly suffered from the lower Berg, happily takes my embers, and with the huge stock of large titanite from the Sens merchant, I upgrade absolutely everything. With the chunks also collected in my travels from various lizards and knights, I also upgrade my composite bow, all the way up to plus 13. Even with a lot of damage fall off due to range, it now does a minimum of 200 up close, with the black bow dealing 220 on a headshot. After hours spent dealing 40 damage, then 140 damage, this felt astronomical to me. I still needed to somehow source a few chunks and a slab for the final upgrades, so to pass the time while I thought ahead, I did a bit of farming in Blighttown. Despite getting uppercutted off the scaffolding, I now sat at a lovely level 216. The bigger numbers helped my confidence a ton, but the issue still remained: what to do about double Manus. It's here that I decide to branch out a little. The composite bow, despite its glory in one-on-one fights, simply can't out DPS two Manuses at once. I needed something harder hitting, meaning a melee weapon, but I also needed a way to not take a huge amount of damage tanking two Manus movesets at once. Purely out of experimentation, I buy out Laurentius's stock, getting my hands on Iron Flesh. Another key to the padlock of all Manus, briefly raises poison defense, at the cost of a complete inability to dodge. It lasts 30 seconds and effectively allows me to tank around 4 hits of Manus in a row. The attacks that would normally knock me down instead stagger me, making it a viable solution to just face tanking. I decided the best place for experimentation would be the Asylum, as I needed to visit it at some point anyway, and I wanted to check if the stray demon would drop a slab. The crow dropped me on the hill, and after a lovely bout of R1 spam, the traders were open. I traded a rubbish for another rare chunk, and after clearing the doorway, I headed inside, before a pair of Manuses decided I needed to appreciate my bow a little more. With the way finally clear, I dropped down to the stray demon. I started off with a little bow kiting, but ended up giving the greatsword a try. I needed a little more practice with melee combat, as for the last 11-ish hours I had exclusively used the bow. With flame resin, it did decent damage for a one-on-one fight, but did nowhere near enough damage to tank two Manuses at once. Of course, he didn't drop a slab, locking me out of the final upgrade until the DLC, which is of course behind O and S. Oh well. On the way back to the doll, the Knight Manus actually dropped his sword. That's when it occurred to me. The Black Knight weapons actually upgrade with Twinkling Titanite. They do insane damage, scaling wise and base damage wise, and I don't even need to worry about their weight with my huge equip load. Just like that, I had a plan. I killed the other Knight Manus, then left the Asylum far behind. After upgrading at Firelink, the Black Knight sword sat at 512 AR, an insane number for a greatsword. It attacked decently fast, and I could pair it with the Grasscrest shield for fast, safe damage in close combat. I wasn't done yet though. The Black Knight sword was just the backup. I headed up to the parish, slowly making my way through to the other side. With the way cleared, I booked it over to the tower, and with 6 humanities, headed upstairs to face the Knight Manus. The Black Knight sword absolutely tore through the knight. 300 damage one-handed meant Manus had no chance. With a bit of effort, the knight went down, and I got my hands on both a chunk and the Black Knight Greatsword. A weapon only the most divine of blacksmiths could have created, and the truest weapon against the Manus Plague. At +5, it sat at 612 damage two-handed. In conjunction with my armor and the stamina regen of my shield, I felt like an absolute juggernaut. Just for the sake of it, I attempted to get the Black Knight Great Axe, but no luck. I felt somewhat ready for ONS, but I still felt that I didn't have enough damage. There really wasn't much else I could use for the fight at this point. +15 upgrades were locked out, all other heavy damaging weapons were late game, and the Great Club, another option, was in the Blighttown swamp, and I was not going back there. I spent a good while thinking and farming souls, attempting to theory craft exactly what my solution would be. After I hit 99 endurance, I decided I needed to make a bit of progress to try and warm up my confidence for the capital. I headed over to Darkrit to take out Great Grey Wolf Manus, just to test out my newfound armor. I had the highest possible defense, fast rolls, stamina regen, and effectively the Buster Sword from the Final Fantasy event in Apex. He stood no chance. I felt really unsure about attempting the capital and having all of my achievements humbled, so I decided to tick the Demon Titanite off the to-do list. It took me eons and multiple tries, but I finally collected it all. With that, I decided to just bite the bullet and head back to the capital. I took out the demon for more Titanite and headed to the giant. I ascended the greatsword into Artorias' greatsword and fully upgraded it with my Titanite. I had no plans to use it, but I feel like it was a nice reminder of who I'm doing this for. If you're wondering why I gave up on the Dark Moon Bow, a big goal from part 1, the reason I got the Sea Arch ring early and farmed the Titanite, it's because I realized it does mainly magic damage, which Manus is far more resistant to. Oh well, the composite bow is more than good enough anyways. With that, I had officially run out of reasons to stall. It was time to test out possibly the single most brain dead strategy in this entire run on possibly the hardest boss. Right, let me explain what my strategy is. The R1 button. I'm completely serious. There's no real viable alternative. This arena is just too small to kite two separate Manuses around. So the backup strategy is Iron Flesh, max defense, the Black Knight sword, and a dream. With a bit of luck, I can tank enough to get them both crowded on me, but there's a lot of issues with this. The Manuses can still stun me, just not knock me down when I'm in Iron Flesh, but enough attacks from them will launch me anyway. Also, the Manuses from the hallway can still hit me, which makes a big cone in front of the fog door completely unsafe. If I can avoid all those things, a single stamina bar will almost completely take out one of the Manuses, but by that point I'll need to somehow pull off an Estus amid two second phase Manuses that never stop attacking for a moment. You can see how that's a problem. It really just becomes an absolute game of luck, blitzing through them as fast as I can, pulling off a heal, and praying I can finish the job before Iron Flesh runs out. If it does run out, my god do I get stomped. I get excruciatingly close to killing one Manus, but he dodges the last hit, then shotguns me. The ideal setup for this is that I kite the hallway Manuses perfectly. I make it to the far corner of the room, pull off an Iron Flesh, and wail on them both and hopefully get one down. If I can just kill one, then the fight is basically finished. Far easier said than done. It really is basically a game of RNG. I technically am powerful enough to beat this, but it all depends on how the Manus AI proceeds with the fight. Use launching attacks too many times, stops me from getting Iron Flesh off, and I die. Spam the Dark Ring attack while I heal. Roll catches me while I deal with the other Manus, and I die. Both randomly decide to do the combo at the same time? Self-explanatory. This fight is quite literally just an RNG test. Despite how difficult it is, I cannot even imagine dealing with it without the Great Knight Sword. 508 damage per swing is so unbelievably beautiful and is the sole reason that this was mildly possible. I say mildly with a lot of bitterness, by the way. The two Manuses seem to perfectly communicate what moves would complement the other in ruining my day. Eventually though, after being bashed against the golden tiles a few times, my brain switched on. I realised that I should use Iron Flesh to abuse my healing as well as my damage, and started chugging the instant I took more than a third of my health in damage. I got immensely lucky with the moveset choices. Both Manuses hugged me the entire time, allowing me to absolutely blitz both health bars at once. Eventually my Iron Flesh ran out, and I was back to being Havel the Pinball. But with enough luck and testosterone strong enough to kill a horse, the Black Knight Sword pulled through, and Executioner Manus went down. With that, it was just me, Dragon Slayer Manus, and the most divine of all weaponry. I got a hard on, and got to work, slowly felling the foul beast. My healing was demolished after the first phase, but Iron Flesh helped tank most of the damage, and I whittled him down, one divine strike at a time. When Iron Flesh ran out, I decided I was ending this honourably. The Black Knight Greatsword has a thrust roll attack, which did 610 damage, and by the 9s it was the most beautiful thing about the weapon. Dragon Menace Slayer stood no chance, and with 3 almighty blows he was struck down. I alone stood at the top of the mountain, the almighty duo no more, and by the fucking gods it felt good. After hours and hours of painstaking travel between bonfires, I finally could warp and would never again have to crush that accursed corridor. I was free. Guinevere really puts it into perspective. I gave her a nose job and despawned almost every single enemy in the capital, permanently making the giant blacksmith safe. I offered the Dark Sun cultists mercy. If they would turn away from the Manus cause, I would offer them refuge, but they said something about my upload schedule. So I obliterated the first one and embarrassed the other. After tanking everything he had, I broke his spirit utterly, and after quietly staring at me, he became a showcase for the cool as hell one-handed strong attack. After doing over 1,000 damage to the Firekeeper, I realized I had finally become a force of nature amidst the plague of Manus. But of course this wasn't the end. Ornstein and Smough are just the defined midpoint of the game. I had 4 lords and the DLC still to go. Let's get to it. Before I started to grind on the lords, I decided I was shortening the process as much as I could. I headed down to New Londo for the chunks hidden in the low areas. I'm going to gloss over it a little, since we'll be revisiting this area quite soon, but the ruins were my second most hated area after the church. Just a fun fact. It takes a tremendous effort, but I eventually grabbed the chunk and grabbed myself a +14 comp bow. There's no slabs available to me until the DLC, but with feather arrows, the composite bow is still perfectly incredible. Now, I have quite a few options of where to head, but I decided that my first lord was going to be the kings. Every single challenge I have ever done for this game, the kings are always the most difficult, and I'd rather just get them out of the way. Easier said than done, however. New Londo Ruins is absolutely choked with Manuses, and the path to the kings is cramped, with multiple watery death spots along the way. After killing the 2 Manuses at the top, I surveyed my home for the next 2 hours. I cheesed 2 more Manuses from dropping on the archway and headed towards the second Titanite chunk. One of the Manus Wraiths ambushed me, but before I could find a good sniper spot, another one joined the party. Luckily, the pillars of the watery courtyard gave me a small arena to 1v1 the second Manus, but he could still reach me, which I very quickly found out. 8 minutes of shooting later, I was back at the courtyard. This time, the Manus Wraith got stuck in the corner here, absolutely begging to be filled with my girthy large arrow. I happily obliged, before reusing the same archway strategy on the other 2 Manuses. I decided to play it a bit safer before running through, and killed 2 more Manus Wraiths in the courtyard. Finally, the stairs were safe to use, until the Manus in here fucking baited me, dodging out of the pillars and bonking me on the head. To prove that I was way tougher than him, I sprinted 100 miles away and shot him until he died. I tried to go up the stairs again, but the second Manus did the exact same thing, and so repeat ad nauseum. Very bored of the R1 button, I finally made it inside, and a Manus gave me a little bonk before I got my hands on a chunk. Now, here was an issue. The Manus Wraith that could spawn around the corner could apparently hit me through solid stone, which was great. The fog door was right around the corner though, so surely it wouldn't be too hard to just run through. Right. What in Gwyn's rectum can I do about the tiny little bridge spanning an ocean of Manus? I have no idea. I decided to execute this one Manus to help boot up my brain. Back in the building, I carefully circled around the side, attempting to bait the corner Manus into a safe spot to shoot. That's when I slipped off the cliff and had to book it before I got smushed. I shot another Manus in the same spot, and then one more just to help clear out the ocean. Okay, where were we? It seemed like a Manus spawns inside the fog door, which causes several issues for the run back. But for now, I took him out easily. Now the bigger issue is the kings. For starters, I have to wear the Covenant, locking out Havel's ring for this boss fight. That's important because the Havel and Favor ring together are what let me use my Juggernaut setup. This severely neuters my defense and offense, forcing me to wear a mix of leather and normal armor for a boss rush of 4 Manuses with limited healing. Let's see how bad this is. Right, so the first king is invisible, I don't know how or why, but the first Manus King is more or less invisible, which as you can imagine makes it extremely hard to burst him down. As any Dark Souls player would know, the second king spawns very soon, so I have to burst down an invisible and aggressive boss that has several moves that will knock me flat, wasting precious time. I can't even see what move he's using half the time as well. Of course, I get nowhere near killing him before the second Manus joins the party. The other Manuses aren't invisible, but all it takes is for one to be, to constantly misjudge the size of hitboxes. I swapped my composite bow halfway through, realizing the Black Knight setup just can't do anything in this fight. The arena is enormous, hopefully giving me room to kite all 3 Manuses, soon to be 4. Of course, I get team comboed to oblivion, placing me very happily back at the drawing board. How do I even deal with this fight? I head back to the blacksmith to upgrade and think. The Havel ring being removed is really what gets me here. I can't min-max my defense like for the ONS fight. I experiment a little, finding a happy medium with a mix of knight, leather and black armor. It allows me to carry my talisman, grass shield, black knight sword and bow, all while fast rolling. Not very good defense, but it saves me hard swapping weapons during the fight. Right, I'm more or less optimized. Time to get back on the grind. It's extremely typical of the kings to be an extremely difficult boss, with an immensely annoying run back. The ruins themselves are enormously time consuming, and I am so insanely burnt out from the similar situation back when I was attempting the gargoyles that I try to experiment a little. Of course, I try to just run through for my first attempt. It goes well. For my next try, I suck it up and shoot everything for 20 minutes. This one fucking Manus dodges every single arrow I shoot, and right as I kill him, he griefs me. On the third try, I suit up before I head down, just to conserve a little more healing. With full armor, I attempt to run through, and the Manus army gives me a personal tour of my own intestines. I almost make it to the fog again, but roll off. On my fourth try, I just run past the top Manuses, hoping they'll get stuck on something. They of course don't. I try to bait this one off the edge, but just to be an asshole, he runs forward, and starts the combo right where I can't escape. They're becoming sentient, I fucking swear it. On my fifth try, I try to be clever, baiting some Manuses off by running on the outside of the courtyard. On my sixth try, I get a little lucky. One of the Manuses wasn't in the room. I take my chance, but immediately waste it. I am losing my mind. On my seventh try, I play a little smarter. Repeat the same strategy and I make it out the door, but head right instead. I try to bait the corner Manus somewhere more helpful, but a random Manus skydives in, and naturally I get bullied in the corner. On my eighth try, I get extremely lucky. I manage to make it to the bridge, but come to a devastating plot twist in the Londo saga. I can't get past the fog Manus. I have to kill him. I won't be able to just run through, because no matter what, I will need to sit somewhere and shoot, meaning I need to clear the entire area out, just for one attempt at the 4 Manuses. The Manuses at Firelink Shrine are really starting to inspire me now. It's time for my favourite part of the All Manus run, stalling time. I decide that if I'm going to slowly shoot every single Manus in the ruins, I need more healing to outlast the chip damage. That answer, of course, leads me to the Tomb of the Manuses. The clerics are lost deep in the Manus-filled darkness, and the only way to get more miracles, before killing Nito that is by saving them. I have a fan-fucking-tastic time attempting to get through the graveyard, and after a lot of effort, make it into the tomb. Not really expecting much difficulty here. The terrain is quite slippery, and most of the Manuses end up falling off. After a Manus helps me kickflip into a rail grind, I make it to the bonfire. There's one small issue though. I want to kindle, to make Nito a little easier when I tackle him, but this guy falls on the bonfire every single time I rest. I'm forced to awkwardly duel him in this little corner every single time I rest. I have enough time to kindle a single time before he jumps me, so this little scuffle takes about 15 minutes, before I finally fully kindle. I get rudely interrupted while talking to Patches and get jump scared by the army staring at me from the dark, but thankfully they're passive. Rhea is luckily alive, and after putting down her two buddies and grabbing replenishment, I walk back up to Firelink. Now that was the easy part. The hard part is that in order to buy miracles from Rhea, I have to go up to the church and talk to her in the main hall. You know, the main hall absolutely choked with Manuses. I decide that the safer way for her sake would be to come from Andre's side and work my way through the Manuses. 10 minutes of shooting later and the hallway is clear. I decide that it's probably within her best interest to come from the front of the church to ensure no Manuses can kill her while I buy from her. Some R1 spam later and the entrance is mostly clear, but there's a big issue. I can't shoot this Manus because the Dark Ring attack would absolutely kill her. Therefore, I decide I can probably just get him stuck on the corridor pillars, and I head in the other way. I make it inside and she's dead. I don't know how or why, but phenomenal waste of effort myself, well done. I do at least get a better talisman for healing. That means I'm locked out of more healing until after Nito is dead, which is excellent. I suppose I at least got replenishment. Every bit helps. I head back to the tomb to ensure Patches spawns later and decide to check it out a bit further. Before I even get to the fog, I randomly get airdropped the Black Knight Halberd. Even though I was already set with the sword, options felt great, and the Black Knight Halberd, despite doing a lot less damage, was faster and lighter. I head deeper into the tomb, not particularly struggling at any point so far. The terrain allows me to both bait Manuses off and shoot when I can't, meaning I don't really struggle. It's a nice change. I am, however, coming up to a certain area that I'm sure many people were excited for. The fucking baby skeletons. There are an enormous amount of Manuses in this cavern. Thankfully they aren't blocking the tunnel, but that doesn't give me a solution of how to get past. I employ my classic strategy of not thinking and actually make it decently far, but get pummeled into oblivion, naturally. This sounds like a problem for future me. I upgrade the halberd at the giant, and while it does look amazing, it unfortunately doesn't have as much range as I thought it did. Specifically in this run, the Black Knight sword outclasses it in range, damage, speed, and looks. I decide to run it for a little, but it's clear what the winner is to me. Right, time to deal with the kings. I decide that regardless of whether I get to them or not, I need a decent run back. This fight is just far too difficult to cope with without knowing I can consistently make it back. I experiment a bit around the ruins, seeing if I can cheese the fog Manus from the roof. It goes well. Of course, I can just shoot every single Manus in the ruins for an hour and a half, like I did for the first attempt, but the kings might take me 10 tries, and if after every attempt I have that hideous of a run back, I will actually go hollow. I find I can semi-consistently make it past this Manus stuck on the walkway, semi being the key word, and after dying again shooting in the exact same spot, I decide to hunt for a safer vantage point. I do a sick ass flip into the ocean for the third time and the fourth time, and despite being griefed on the fifth try, I make it inside on the sixth and up to the high walkway, which is entirely safe. The Manus by the fog is unloaded, but his hitbox is, and while it takes ages shooting an invisible enemy, I kill him eventually and absolutely fucking sprint to the fog. In hindsight, I probably should have shot more, but I make it anyway. I decide to fully try the halberd before I toss it, and with 20 Estus, a ton of miracles, and terrible armor, I drop into the 4 kings. The invisible Manus actually causes a unique problem for the halberd. When halberds miss attacks in Dark Souls 1, they make you stagger a little, making you vulnerable as punishment for missing. This issue makes the invisible Manus very, very hard to deal with, as I literally can't tell where he starts and ends. Despite that, I get the king's health bar to half by the time the second king arrives. This drastically fucks up my ability to deal damage, forcing me to wait out specific attacks, and I barely get one hit off before the third king spawns. Here is where I swap to the bow, completely giving up on melee combat. The arena is huge, giving me enough room to spam back rolls and let my stamina regen. I get a few lucky arrows off every time they all clump up, but the opportunity is rare. I get the most disgusting team combo of a jump to dark ring to raw combo, literally removing my health bar in barely 2 seconds. On top of that, I hit the arena limit. I barely dodge my way out of it, all 3 Manuses frantically spamming attacks. I managed to pull off some Estus, and it almost seems like I got away. But oh yeah, what's this boss called again? I get absolutely curb stomped with quite literally no way to get out of it. Right. Complete demoralization aside, what did I learn? I have to beat this fight before the 4th Manus. 3 is already stretching my esophagus. 4 black monsters at the same time just tears it apart. The best strategy seems to be just wailing on the invisible Manus until the second spawns, then just shooting as fast as I can, hopefully killing them before the third one spawns. Another 30 minutes of run back attempts later, and trust me, I mean 30 minutes, I'm finally back at the Kings. This time I try the tank strategy I used in ONS, but this causes several problems. For one, the arena is huge, so if I keep getting knocked back, like I am right here, then I'll never get backed up against a wall, thus giving me a chance to attack. 2, this strategy heavily relies on Manus' dipshit AI, and if he keeps spamming knockdown attacks, not only will it make me take a ton of damage, wear out the 30-second timer of Iron Flesh, and destroy my healing reserves, the second Manus will also spawn with barely any progress made. Funnily enough, I find all of this out during the fight, and end up wasting an entire hour's worth of run back attempts. Yeah, the 30 minutes was just being generous. At this point, I could be legally identified as insane. I had been attempting the Kings for hours now, and while I had slowly, painfully developed a run back, the actual fight was still the issue. Many years later, I was back for a new attempt, this time with the same brain-dead strategy, but with maxed defense instead. I decided to give it one last try before abandoning it for the Mosquito playstyle. This time, instead of Iron Flesh, I whipped out Replenishment to regen a little health over time, while still giving me some mobility. I absolutely wailed on the Invisible King, getting extremely lucky with his attack pattern. The combo of max defense and regen healing actually worked really well, as the mediocre healing is actually offset quite a lot when I don't take as much damage. I crushed his health bar down to below half, and got extremely lucky with a Dark Bead. The second Manus ended up spawning, but I was much further along the main health bar this time. One running attack did over 1,000 damage, piercing both at once. Another R1 swing did another 1,000, and the second R1 ended it. The 4 Kings, bane of my existence for the last 3 hours, finally fell to the most intelligent playstyle of all time. Hit things until they stop moving. I fucking love the Black Knight sword. I decided that, with this major victory under my belt, I was done looking like a Roblox character. I fully upgraded the Black Iron set. Yeah, sure, it gave me less defense, but it looked cool as hell. And I feel like for such a miserable run, I wanted to look the part of the juggernaut I was trying to be. 1 Lord down, 3 to go. For my next Lord, I decide to completely switch in difficulty. I head down to the Demon Ruins, and after resting at the bonfire, I mercy kill the Firekeeper and Eggman, grabbing myself a warpable bonfire and a Firekeeper soul. I then visit the Congregation of Manai, deep in the ruins. They bless my passage, warning me of a ruptured rectum, should I attempt an all Artorias run in the next video. I don't heed their warning, and head towards Ceaseless, who I was expecting to not have been changed by the randomizer. Turns out he was, and the Ceaseless Manus charge just got plopped on the side of the cliff. I beat him easily, draining the lava and heading down into the ruins. It looks a little messy, but it seems like all the cliff Manuses fell off. The Worm Manus wakes up, but after an awkward scuffle he goes down, and I grab the bonfire. Now, here is where things get difficult. Every single Capra Manus is now above me, perfectly blocking the stairs, as well as the stone demons in the same spot. The main issue is that they will happily drop down onto me and ruin my day. I try to escape and make it past the horde, but of course I don't, and get bullied in the corner. On my next try, I decided instead to use my favourite strategy of standing still for 30 minutes pressing one button. I whittle down several Manuses before I randomly get ambushed again and repeat ad nauseum. Just to make sure it's impossible, I attempt to run past one more time. The Manuses happily pound me into a pulp. I don't think you understand the absolute desperation I have to not have to shoot in a corner for an hour. To change strategies a bit, I head back to the top of the ruins, hoping the location change might bait a few off. Lo and behold, it worked perfectly. I decide to shoot the stone Manuses from the cliff before immediately getting bored. I run down the stairs and up again, baiting the stone demons onto the lower level before baiting every single one off. Absolutely flawless execution myself. Well done. Onto the Fire Sage. The way forward was all but clear, and I headed into the fog. The Fire Sage was a one-on-one fight, in a spacious room. Basically, it was already over, until a new Fire Sage stepped into the ring. I respected his courage, despite the fact that I curb stomped him. With Fire Sages 1 and 2 defeated, I attempted to go to the bonfire, but I was rudely interrupted. I then convinced this Manus that I would personally remaster Bloodborne if he followed me onto the branches, and desperate as he was, he fell for it. Into the Centipede Demon. For some weird reason, the Centipede's eyes rendered on top of the Manus model, giving it kind of a cool effect. I didn't have time to admire it for long, however, as he requested an emergency circumcision from the Black Knight's sword. Just for the flex, I sprinted across the lava, before being attacked by a ton of health bars. I gave a silent prayer for my poor laptop, and after optimizing my armor to work with the charred ring, continued forwards. With a small 630,000 souls deposited happily into my offshore Anor Londo account, I rested at the bonfire, and was served some lovely fried Manus one more time. A few apparently survived, pushing me back into the tunnel. Despite the sheer amount of magic they were spamming, I made it back safely, before immediately breaking their ankles and booking it up the tree roots. Into Lost Izalith, land of saturation. It was almost entirely empty in the lava fields, save for a few weirdo Manuses. I made it up the tree roots with no problems, before running into my favourite issue in this run, clogged pipes filled with Manuses. I had a fantastic time shooting them all, before accidentally slipping on a branch and getting roughly pounded against the wall. I did survive, but I realised I was actually stuck in a little playpen, courtesy of the branches. I gave up and tried again. This time, I didn't slip like an idiot and instead stood still and pressed one button like an idiot. Oh wait, did you like that gameplay? Here's some more! And some more! I get that Izalith was unfinished, but why was the band-aid solution just cramming a ton of pointless enemies here? I don't think I've ever been hit by a stone demon once in this area. Anyways, after an excruciating half an hour, I was up at the top. I said hi to my goth wife and headed into the fog. I want you to realize something that I also realized here. The Bed of Chaos isn't a regular enemy, and so there's every chance that she isn't replaced and I have to deal with all of that shooting again every single time I die to Dark Souls platforming. This Manus decides he's sick of my thought process, and I begin sliding, dreading what I'll find at the bottom. The Bed of Chaos model is loaded with strings attached, but the Manus has the health bar. Thank fuck. I was not ready to go back to Stone Demon City. 2 Lord Souls down. I found it kind of funny that the bed model also dies. Before I leave, I check out the arena, which aside from its inhabitant, is actually cool as hell. I've always wished that the Bed of Chaos was an actual demonic overlord, not what we got. Even if it was like an arena with waves of demons spawning in, it still would have been cool as hell. Also, fun fact, I can almost guarantee that myself and now you lovely viewers are the first to ever see the Bed of Chaos dead, with gold strings attached, and without the arena broken. Also, if you're wondering, yes, the little tunnel is open, and yes, I can light the bonfire. Actually a pretty cool reward for beating the area. Anyways, 2 Lord Souls down. In Challenger Andy's video, the archive seemed like a pain in the Manus, so I decided to put it off and head towards Nito. I squeezed past the dark portion barely and headed towards the fog, baiting most of the skeleton Manuses off. Right, here's the part a lot of people thought would be the second time I need to use quit-outs: the baby skeletons. Turns out you were absolutely, completely, without a doubt wrong. Every baby got stuck on the terrain, while I sniped a Manus that blocked the cliff. Then all I had to do was book it, and I made it with barely any damage. One of the skeletons gave me a slap on the back as congratulations, and I made it inside. I have to say, this is probably the single advantage this run has over the Gwyn run. Honestly, the only area that was, in purely gameplay wise, easy. Anyways, fuck me, it's Nito. Nito with a zillion skeletons in the arena. Every single one might be a Manus. In Andy's run, they didn't get transformed by the randomizer, so again, all I could do was pray. After grumbling about his mediocre moveset in the base game, Gravelord Nito rushed me instantly. The fact that he was the only one that did was a good sign. It meant that either the skeletons were skeletons, or the skeletons were Manuses that were passive. Thank fuck they were just skeletons. I have literally never been happy to see these fuckers in the fight, but I could have drawn Erotic Sans fan art for them, I was that happy. Gravelord Manus was cake, which meant it was now 3 lords down. Before I headed to the archives, an area I expected to live in for several hours, I decided to get the DLC set up, just to save time. After the golems went for an excursion into the valley, I headed towards the bay, but the Hydra was nowhere to be seen. Turns out he just got swapped with this Manus, and after beating the golden Manus, which was significantly harder in the water, Dusk teleported behind me, before ghosting me since I didn't have 99 strength. Yet. Before I headed to Seath, I went deeper into the gardens, attempting to get to the elite Knight set. Fun fact, I did so much damage now with the rolling R1 that it wouldn't even play a hit sound effect. Manus just went straight into his next animation. It feels good to be the best. I spent years getting the elite Knight set before taking it with my last breath. Why did I waste about half an hour on an armor set I would go on to literally never make use of? I don't know, okay? I'm just doing my best. I took out the butterfly, who also spawned on the bridge as a Manus, just as the little boss cleanup, before heading back to Firelink. I realized as well that Patches had actually survived the tomb, and I was able to up my healing just a little bit. Right, no more stalling. I head to Anor Londo, darkened by the plague of Manus. I bait both of the peaks to the entrance before taking them out, to ensure the bonfire is safe. Without thinking of what garbage would await me above, I hit the lever and headed upwards. Oh my fucking god, this is a mess. The only solution I could think of was to bait as many as I could onto the elevator, and then shoot at them from somewhere in the lobby. I could two-hand the Havel shield to use it, so up I went with my first strategy. The shield worked amazingly, despite how much stamina it chewed through to block it all. The issue though, was that the Manuses seemed stuck on the elevator doorway. This is a massive problem, since there's no way in hell I can fight one up the top. And also nowhere to shoot from, meaning I have to get them unstuck somehow. It's here I realised that the absolute bane of my mental state, the combo attack, actually moves Manus forwards a bit when he uses it, and he can't cancel it unless he starts falling. I didn't have a strategy, but I did have an idea. What if I baited them up the top, and right as one started to combo, I hit the elevator, and maybe got one to die from fall damage. It was an idea at best. I ran at the Manus to hopefully bait them into using it, but instead I just popped through, getting a glimpse of what would be next. I didn't make it back to the elevator, but I did find out that there isn't enough Manuses to fully block me at the doorway. This time, I threw on Havel's set for the poise, replenishment for extra health, and with the grass crest on my back for stamina, I held my ground with the great shield. One Manus's foot stepped into what I thought was the elevator, but he sadly didn't fall. I went up again, realizing that he wasn't there anymore. When I went back down, I got 30k souls, indicating that maybe there was an invisible roof where the elevator top was, and if the Manuses were pushed far enough, they could actually fall out of the map. It was worth a shot. I went up and down again, and just like that, it seemed to work. Another Manus gone. This time one followed me down the elevator, which of course left him begging and drooling at the thought of more of my large arrow. The next time I went up, it seemed to just be one left in the little entrance, so I went up next with sword in hand. There were actually still 3 crammed together, but with some luck, one fell out of the map, and the other 2 were just a bit too aggressive. I got one stuck on the elevator, and after pumping him full of arrows, I went up one more time and took out the last. Now, time for part 2. There are a fuck ton of enemies in the archives, and I really needed to be careful, since one wrong move would actually let the Manuses rush through the doorway. The issue was that despite having a safe shooting spot, I was so far away that the Manuses kept dodging, threatening to repeat the same problem as the one in the ruins. Eventually my luck ran out and I had to run, but one of the Manuses finished his combo attack at exactly the perfect time, with the jump part launching him over the railing, and to a satisfying smushy death. By the time I got back up, there were now too many Manuses to handle with the sword, and so I resumed my extremely boring strategy. I eventually got the broken pendant, and slowly cleared out the Manuses with the same strat, before dueling the last one in the elevator hall. I was confident, egotistical even, until I forgot that I am in fact fighting Manus, who does in fact have a second phase, and my sword is in fact not a good shield. Haha, it's okay, I'll just do all of that again. All of that again later, I was back at the main hall. Most of the terrain was too tight for the Manuses to get around, and I made happy use of it, before eventually getting to the elevator. I was a little worried about the next portion since I would spawn in the prison with 2 Manuses next to me and an ocean about to sprint up the stairs. Oh well, an issue for 5 minutes from now. The crystal guy wasn't transformed, and neither was Seath. With my big fuck off health bar, I was kind of worried I'd be cursed before I died. But I remembered I had a ring of sacrifice, so womp womp Seath. Into the prison. The 2 Manuses bum rushed me instantly, but I was luckily able to grab the key and head out before I was squished. Now I was faced with a new issue, an army of angry black pogo sticks. I died instantly. But on the next try I booked it up the stairs, with my main goal being to get out of reach before the horde gets to me. The Manuses in the cells acted as stage hazards, but I got there eventually. From my vantage point, it looked like the Manuses hadn't pathfinded up the stairs, but that unfortunately meant they were right below, stuck on the floor and posing an obstacle I'd need to get past. I took out a few of the Manuses to remove the roadblocks and headed downstairs. Every single Manus had congregated beneath the stairs, which made it very difficult to actually run past since it was thin enough to hit through. Regardless though, I kept trying, breaking through, and despite being tripped over right before the ladder and getting bonked on the head while climbing, I very luckily made it through on the first try. I grabbed the key, homewarded back, and immediately got stuck again. Look, you know the drill. Unloaded Manus, I shoot his hitbox, he dies, I make 5 meters of progress. The upper archives were absolutely clogged, necessitating some fun bow spam, but with a lot of effort I made it through and down the ladder. The Mimic Manus notices me, putting a time limit on getting to the bonfire, but the real issue was the second one inside. I got team comboed right next to the bonfire, taking 2 full combo attacks in a row. But the Black Iron set did its best, and I managed to pull off an Estus, and after one Manus accidentally jumped off, I was able to duel the second one, and safely light the bonfire. I didn't rest just in case, but I now could warp there in the future. I headed into the courtyard, barely squeezing my way into the cave. As you can imagine, the cave proper was easy and mostly stress-free, but I did end up getting blocked by the crabs at the end. I experimented a little with a safe spot, with an extreme fear of being punted into the crystal abyss, but I ended up finding a Valorant angle at the back, and I took them all out after an eventful 15 minutes. Except for one apparently. This guy got the sword treatment. With the area cleared, I headed into Manus the Scaleless with more than enough heals. He showed me his cool new outfit, which for some reason the randomizer didn't touch, before changing back to his regular avatar. I took out the crystal and had a lovely duel to finish out the 4 lords. What massive fucking progress. I wish I could have shown this to the version of myself that was stuck in the parish. Four lords were now down, but the run is still far from over. Over the course of my adventures, I now sat at level 249, an absolute force of pure vengeance. Before I fully committed to the DLC, I realized I still had quite a bit of cleanup to do. The Gaping Dragon still awaited me in his lair of Manai, and holy fuck, there was divine justice to be meted out. I try a suicide run twice, but fun fact, it doesn't work at all. The slow way it is. The very, 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 very slow way later, I make it downstairs, and one awkward scuffle and one R1 spam later, I make it to the slime hallway. The Manuses are sprouting from the ceiling, but luckily they aren't ripe enough to ambush me yet, and I grab the bonfire easily. The next area is a bit more of a problem though. All of the rat Manuses have invisibly congregated in this tiny cramped hallway, fully blocking me. It looks like another opportunity for epic bow gameplay, but the giant rat Manus actually hits me through the bars, meaning there isn't a single safe spot in this little area I can shoot from. I decide that he has to go, and after the single most irritating one-on-one so far, he goes down, and I can very slowly shoot the handful of invisible Manuses. It's a very long, boring process, but eventually I make it through after 20 minutes. I head onwards before being blocked again by even more rats. Finally moving on, I head deeper into the sewers, making it to the open part which has, you guessed it, even more Manuses. Dying a little inside with each arrow I fire. I make it through after another fun 15 minutes. Oh, never mind, one more. I finally get through and make it to the big rat arena. I'm a little unsure of where to go, so I just slide down and hope there isn't a clusterfuck of Manus rats. Luckily there isn't for some reason, and I head into the gaping arena. A noodle angrily rears up at me, and I take him down shortly after, finishing off the last boss in the base game. With that, my cleanup is done. I head back to the parish and begin my journey into the DLC. I repeat the same baiting process in the basin, and bearing my new title of Ultimate Master Baiter, I head into the portal. The Guardian is a one-on-one in an open arena. Enough said, on to the meat of the DLC. The wood is an absolute mess. The farmer Manuses fall off the cliff, but there is an enormous amount of Manuses hidden in the trees. I bait the close ones off, shoot the ones that get stuck on the bridge, and slowly make my way in deeper. With a pretty large amount of Manuses gone, I assume it's safe to book it. and while I sprint along the edge of the cliff, I realize how dumb I was, right before I get Falcon punched off. There is so many enemies here. This time I play a bit more methodical, and slowly bait out every enemy in the forest, drawing them back to the bridge where they either fall or I shoot. It's a slow but safe process, and before long, haha that's a joke, after an aggravating amount of time, the forest is safe enough to run through. The Manuses here are proficient rock and tree climbers, and feeling very threatened, I run right through. With a fairly safe walk, the forest is finished, and I make it to Chester. He mentions something about a shadowy limb, and having not seen a single one so far, I say no. I then go into the man himself, Manus the Artorias Walker. It's very sad to see him having fallen so far, but the knight gives me one last fight before I end the plague ravaging his body. Time for the township. It seems fairly easy-ish at first. Most Manuses can be baited to fall off, and most of them already have. I don't get any real blockages until I hit the first building. Now, there is the definition of a fuck ton of enemies in here. I'm talking undead parish level. What this means, I say with a huge smile on my face, is that I have to shoot a lot. The first few go down, and I'm met with a mosh pit that could challenge Blighttown. Before I tackle it, I take out what I'm assuming is the Mimic, but he doesn't drop the key for some reason. I'll come back to this, mainly because I get ambushed by a Manus, who absolutely begs for a good curb stomping. I obliged, then absolutely fly down the stairs and up the side passage. I consider using it for a sniping spot, but that should be your answer as to why not. I get blocked at the top of the stairs, but I use the same trick from the asylum to get past. To celebrate, I decide to accidentally fall right into the death pit and land at one hit. I don't know how, but I got an Estus off, but it ends up just prolonging the inevitable. A very long while later, and I mean a long while later, and I'm back at the same spot, this time determined not to choke. I of course do, accidentally falling off again, and get swatted like a fly. With an almighty run of good luck, a Manus helps me onto the elevator, and the shortcut is unlocked. This presents the next issue though. How do I get out of it? The Manuses in the long path ahead have free access to the tiny elevator door, and can freely knock me off or back onto the pressure plate. I have a fantastic time bashing my head against this elevator-shaped brick wall, before finally a stroke of good luck hits, and I shoulder charge through the blockade. I absolutely sprint to the other side, and barely make it down the corridor. Every single Manus still chasing. I still have to wait for the elevator though, but with just enough luck left to spare, I survive the squishing corner and jump on the elevator without dying. Finally, safety. I head into the chasm of the abyss, determined to finish the DLC, end this run once and for all, before I notice something. I am getting an absolute truckload of souls, and I realize something. The terrain is too slippery here for the Manus horde. I have a bonfire right next to me, and complete safety. After hours and hours of pain, I finally found it. The ultimate farm. I farm millions, tens of millions of souls, and go absolutely wild. I boost my strength to 66, the absolute highest damage I can attain when I two-hand the Black Knight sword, and farm and farm and farm until I reach 99 vitality. Now I stand at the peak of what once was an impassable mountain. I am without a doubt the strongest being in this Manus-plagued land. And now I will confront the source of the scourge himself. I head deeper into the dark, bearing Artorias' weapon, intent on vengeance of the most holy kind. The Father of the Abyss challenges me, and I, with Artorias' puppy in my heart, smite him down with absolute ease. The source of the scourge destroyed with the most fitting weapon. With the run coming to an outrageously drawn out end, I head back to the township to pay my respects and confirm something for myself. You see, the Mimic with the key to unlock Goth's cell actually places the item on the ground. This means that in this run, it is impossible to down Calamite and actually fight him, but I wanted to make sure that he wouldn't just spawn as a Manus anyway, just so I can fully check him off the all bosses list. I head into the valley, and while I do end up fighting one of the dog Manuses, Calamite does show up, unfortunately making it impossible to defeat every boss. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. The arena is literally the biggest in the game, so it would have been the absolute easiest fight, but I still would have liked to have beaten it. Before I leave the DLC behind, I grab the Titanite Slab, the final upgrade for my composite bow, to turn me into a true juggernaut of both ranged and melee. With that, the run is almost over. I had beaten every boss and conquered every single Forsaken challenge. Well, all except one, the very last gauntlet, and one I had purposefully left to the end of the run, the Painted World. Now, the reason I left this to the end is that it is a one-way trip, meaning once I head in, I can't back out except by beating Priscilla, effectively softlocking the entire run. I didn't know how the Painted World would go, so I wanted to absolutely beat everything else in the game before I attempted it, just so that all would be left is Gwyn if I can't make it out. Well, there's nothing else left. No more upgrades and no more bosses. Time for the last challenge in the run. I slowly beat all of the Guardians and head into the painting, fully expecting for this to be the tomb of the All-Manus run. Starting off, things seem okay. No Manuses are rushing down the hill like I thought they would be, so luckily I'm not softlocked. I head up to the bonfire and am met with the final and most aggravating shooting gallery in the run. The Manuses here are easily shot from a little bit away, and take barely any time to take down. With max upgrades and levels, my composite bow does 329 damage on a headshot, taking down Manus in 21 shots. It feels so good. Before long, this entrance area is cleared, but I run into even more Manuses. The stairs are blocked, necessitating some more shooting, but the Manuses fully unload at the entrance, not just their model. I experiment a little and find a little spot here where the Manus' hitboxes load, and after an excruciatingly fun time of attempting to shoot an invisible hitbox, I manage to take out 2 or 3, I'm not sure. I try the stairs again, but nope, still blocked. Just because I can, I take out this other random Manus, and then realise a few more Manuses have made their way into my sightline. After a fun 10 minutes spent mainly shooting the air, I try the stairs again, but still blocked. I try sitting still and shooting as much as I can, but I take so much damage it isn't worth it. That's when I realise quite a bit of the damage is coming from below, from which a single Manus is stuck at the door. I take him out and voila, I'm able to shoot almost uninterrupted at the top of the stairs. The keyword is almost. I still take some damage, but one Manus goes down, and I find that the other 2 are just barely loaded in at this little angle here. After 30 minutes, I finally make it up the entrance of the Painted World. I take out this unfortunate Manus, who gets to taste the absolute maximum power of the composite bow. That being close range, large arrow, and headshot damage, all combined for 380. It's so beautiful. I head up a bit further, finding myself on this very precarious bridge between 2 Manus houses. I do a bit of damage, but it isn't safe in the slightest, mainly because of the Manus behind me giving me constant backshots. I clear him out in his own turf and return to my task. Before long, the bow does its job and I continue through. I gear up for a scenic battle on the bridge, but the Dragon Manus decides he hates cinematography. I head back inside, opening the fog and revealing something horrifying. The Phalanx Manus stand between me and opening the shortcut. The only way I can skip everything I just endured. I quickly take out the Manuses behind me, before attempting to bait the Phalanx. Turns out there was one extra Manus, and he decided to jump behind me the instant I woke them all up. I swear they're becoming sentient. Luckily, the Phalanx couldn't follow me inside, and so I had a lovely arena to take out my stress on the ambusher. Unfortunately, during the fight, the Phalanx Manuses had split up and grouped away from the door, giving me no angles to take advantage of. With literally no other option, I locked in and sprinted, somehow making it on my first go, which I will gladly take. I shot most of the Phalanx through the door and the rest on the terrain, and so cleared out the courtyard, at least for this go around. First half of Painted World finished. Time for the sewers, the most annoying challenge in the run next to the parish. This area is insanely cramped, and absolutely crammed with as many bone wheels as the team would let Miyazaki personally place. Of course, that means this is an area with barely any sightlines, with around 15 enemies, and a constant barrage of attacks that can go through walls. The solo wheels had fallen out of the map, but there was an enormous cluster around the only way forward, with barely any room to snipe from. At first it didn't seem too bad. I did a lot of damage and I could reliably hit them from this angle. The instant I changed a Manus to second phase, however, my chess pieces completely fell off the board. I couldn't do anything to dodge the dark magic ring combined with the other Manus' attacks. My health bar was so massive it literally went past the visible limit, but it wasn't enough and I had nowhere to run from the barrage. I could barely get a single shot off, and all that did was put more Manuses into second phase, since half the time my target would dodge and I'd have to start again, since the tunnel was short enough for them to hit me, but long enough for them to register as a dodgeable projectile. I spent so fucking long in this sewer, literally running out of feather arrows and having to swap. Fun fact, I can't restock without leaving the painted world, so too many attempts and I'm permanently soft locked with nothing but a sword. I try offhanding the Havel Shield to react block the Darkring attacks, but it takes so long to swap back to the bow that I don't even get a chance to attack, meaning I'm just prolonging my death while making less damage progress. It feels impossible, and honestly, it is. Eventually I would run out of 999 of every arrow, and the run would be permanently over. So with that in mind, and in the interest of finishing this run in a satisfying manner, this sewer would become the second place in the run where I had no choice but to use quitouts. I do feel like it was warranted though, as both here and Blighttown were actually impossible to complete without, especially here, since I effectively have a limited number of attempts at getting past. Anyways, with Forbidden Power crackling in my hands, I zoom past and hit the lever. All that's left is to take down Priscilla and head for the kiln. Finally. I dodge past the phalanx, the wake up animation giving me barely enough time to make it indoors. And after a fun little battle royale, I head upstairs, deciding it would probably be safer to go to the fog from the top of the bridge, with the sheer amount of enemies underneath. I find the Manus that fell off earlier still standing, but strangely passive, before I realize this is actually the Dragon Butt Manus. It's actually kind of funny. This is literally the only Manus so far that doesn't aggro no matter what I do. It's a nice change. Anyways, I drop down, seeing the army of passive Manuses behind me that, had I gone the usual way, I would have had to deal with. Struggling with the burden of my intellect, I head into Crossbreed Manus, who after spitting absolutely rancid lies, falls to my blade after barely 20 seconds. I never thought I'd say it, but I am so insanely strong that a single Manus feels like a regular hollow. When I decided to do this challenge, I honestly did not think I'd be ending it on a high note, but I feel like I actually conquered this run, not just beat it. Speaking of, I head back into Drangleic. Lothric, sorry. The painting Manuses all greet me enthusiastically, but I thankfully respawn at Anor Londo, not the painting. I head back into Sens, and from there warp to Firelink Shrine for the very last time. I say goodbye to everyone, crestfallen guy who has dementia for some reason, and Laurentius, who I honestly could not have beaten this run without him. Genuinely, the Iron Flesh combo is the only way I could have gotten past ONS. I say goodbye, before congratulating Patches on also surviving the Manus Plague. I still have no idea how he didn't die in the tomb. I feel a bit sad that I couldn't save Griggs way back then, but these 3 survivors of the Manus Plague ease my guilt. It was time to end it. I head into the kiln, the ghost Manuses giving me a soulful farewell, and I make my way towards the Lord himself. I beat every single Manus along the way, absolutely obliterating the last of the plague with the strength I had painfully accumulated. Eventually the last Menai fell, and I entered the fog one last time. The Lord of the Abyss couldn't do anything against my arsenal. I countered him up close and from a distance, and he could only flail. One hit from defeat, I unsheathed Artorias' blade for the final time, and with all the strength I had gathered over the course of this run, I struck. The final Manus fell, and the plague was no more. There was only one thing left to do. I stoked the first flame, letting it consume my strength as a catalyst, in order to truly purge the world of the plague of Manai. And so, the legend of Artorias 2 comes to an end. Holy fuck, that was incredibly unpleasant. I've played tedious runs before, namely the Dark Hand run, but that was something else. I think I pretty much dissected every emotion I felt at every twist and turn of this run, but I have never felt so demoralized, and also never felt as exhilarated throughout this run. The challenge was insane sometimes, but thinking it through and using the tools the game gave was the most satisfying and aggravating gaming experience I've ever had. Before I truly say goodbye to my Black Knight, I run through the Asylum, slaying every single Manus that plagued me in the beginning, before finally completing my All Bosses run. Thank you so much for watching. If you did watch this far, I do appreciate it a lot, and I really appreciate the support. I plan to do more videos like this in the future, so if this in part 1 was entertaining to you, then please subscribe. I'll probably do something just a tiny bit more laid back for my next video, but regardless, I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.